All right, then we'll move to the Riverside Brookfield COVID-19 information plan.
Okay, so based on the local media, it appears that we would be trending towards phase 4, possibly early July, maybe even late June. You're starting to see some restrictions slowly be lifted. There were some updates from the IHSA here I'll touch on briefly. There were also some updates in regards to summer school sent out by the state. Now, our summer school program had already started, but I think the trend we're starting to see is that we could see some of the guidelines and restrictions that were put in under the governor's 5-phase plan to be maybe softened or move to a phase 4 at a much sooner pace. Once we are in phase 4, the board would transition back to in-person meetings. And so my recommendation is that we set a tentative in-person meeting for the July 14th. Obviously, if there's a spike in cases or something changes and we can't do an in-person meeting, we can continue with the Zoom platform. But at this point in time, I would recommend that we try to look at doing an in-person meeting in July, whether that be in the alumni lounge or even possibly in the main gym. We're working through some things with our facility staff and RBTV staff, but that's something to be on the lookout for. I go down to return to work. 12-month employees have returned to work. We implemented summer hours starting this week, which is 7:30 to 3:30 Monday through Friday. We do have 12-month employees that are using their vacation time, both administrators and support staff. So we're trying to limit the business in the building to essential business only. So parents, if you have a fee balance you need to pay or a fee question, you need to pick up paperwork, a transcript, something that you don't feel comfortable calling or emailing in, that essential business can be addressed in the building. But we would ask that if you could handle something electronically or over the phone, to try that first. The RB COVID-19 committee, transition committee, has been established. There's representatives from the administration, the faculty, parents, instructional coaches. I have our 2 student board members on there as well. And so that we are trying to set our first meeting date for sometime next week. Return to school. The transition committee will assist with the planning that we're working with local groups and state associations to try to identify the restrictions and see if we can get some of these guidelines lifted. I spent some time this week both on a call with the West 40 superintendents as well as the high school, Illinois High School District organization, which is all the superintendents from high schools throughout the state of Illinois. The bigger concern is from the high school district in that the current guidelines that are in place from the CDC, whether we came back in some type of hybrid model or some type of in-person model, it's going to be next to impossible to operate a high school schedule with those current guidelines. So the High School Superintendents Association is working on a letter to the State Board of Education, also a letter to the State Task Force who's working on the COVID side for the education side, and see if we can work with them to get some of these guidelines lifted. The preliminary guidelines that were out there apply more to middle school, where students are middle or elementary schools, where students are kind of in the same classroom all day. They eat their lunch in the same classroom. Obviously, that would not work for a traditional high school where you have to change classrooms. You have to go to classrooms where there's labs, CTE classrooms, those types of things. So more information will follow. I'll continue to work on that through the transition committee, and I'll provide updates accordingly to the board in July. An example was they told us all through May that all summer school had to be virtual. So we are doing virtual summer school, and then last Friday they came out and they said we could do in-person summer school as long as it's under groups of 10. And so one thing that we've tried to do throughout this whole period of time from March on is, once we put out information to our families, is not trying to retract it and changing our direction mid-stride. So we will continue to run virtual summer school and virtual extended school year for anybody with an IEP that has extended school year hours. And then we'll just continue to work with our transition committee on planning the next school year. In communication items related to COVID, I thought the virtual graduation ceremony and the drive-up graduation ceremony was a huge hit with the community and with all the seniors. So I want to thank all the board members for participating in that. A big shout out to Dr. Freitas, Mr. Mannon, Ms. Lindquist, all the administrators, all the teachers, all the support staff, everybody that did their part. Thank you very much. We received a ton of positive feedback from the community, so thank you. We'll continue to watch that possibility of the in-person ceremony on June 29th, but it doesn't look as if the restrictions for 1,000+ gatherings will be lifted. But I will send out that communication as promised closer to the end of June. There is a curriculum advisory council. I could touch on that later. So in regards to anything else related to the summer, virtual summer school's in place. Obviously the youth summer camps have canceled. That has not changed. The June summer rentals have been canceled. We'll be sending out an update about July. The IHSA has released general guidance for athletes to return to some form of conditioning and strength training, non-sport specific. So the guidelines that were sent out is that coaches can get together with their athletes in groups of greater than 10. They can do conditioning and strength training, agility training, but they shouldn't be using equipment specific to their sport. So I know Brendan Curtin was working with both conference ADs and head coaches to come up with finalized plans that the athletes would need to follow to begin coming back on campus and to work out with their coaches. Dr. Freitas will provide a residency update during the principal's report, and I believe that is it for the COVID update.
All right. That's a lot to swallow there.
What?
Go ahead, Gina.
Oh, thanks. I just have a fast question. I saw that in the ISB guidance, they had addressed guidance for driver's ed. Are we doing driver's ed this summer? Is that part of summer school?
Thank you very much for that reminder. Actually, Hector is working right now with Mr. Reck, who is our driver's ed coordinator, and they are going to begin to put out some guidelines to families so that we can do some form of behind the wheel this summer. Hector can maybe touch on this. Hector, I know you were working with Jason on which students would have first access to it, with students from the fourth quarter.
Yeah, boss, this is part of my principal's report. I'll touch up on one at my time, okay? I'll address it.
I just want to reiterate, and I think probably I speak for everyone, the graduation ceremony was very moving. I actually did not mind one bit that it took up about 7 hours of my day from the time we left to go for the parade till the virtual online was done, and enjoyed every minute of the 3 hours of standing there and cheering for all those kids. So very well done. I've gotten compliments from people in the community and actually people outside of the community who have nieces, nephews, friends who have kids, have all commented on how well that we did. So good work, everyone.